Ketter at the Cabin presents B.O.C. with Ketter. Fly fishing, stories, connection. Now pour yourself a drink. Right, welcome back to B.O.C. with Ketter. We are in season 2. I do have another special guest with me tonight. I'm going to go ahead and kick it on over and let him introduce himself.
Thank you for having me on this week, man. Means a lot to get the invite. Hey guys, I'm Caleb Corona. I'm the owner, guide, fly tyer with Regal Beagle Fly Fishing, located here in the Minneapolis area, Minnesota.
Awesome. Yeah, Caleb and I just kind of connected over Instagram, just kind of chatting here and there, and just figured we'd get some time to do some chat. And so I'm happy to have you here, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again.
So how long have you been fly fishing, and what got you into it, Caleb?
So got my first fly rod for my 12th birthday present. I'm 31 now, so 18 years, something like that, somewhere in there. But yeah, I grew up in Tennessee, fishing a lot of farm ponds and rivers, and grew up more on the conventional side. My dad was a big tournament bass guy with shiny boats and all that. And went out to a farm pond one day, saw the first guy ever throwing a fly rod. Looked really interesting to me, so I got to kind of stole his for a little bit, and he taught me some of the basics behind it. And that's pretty much all it took. A few bluegills to start out and one decent bass, and yeah, that's about all she wrote.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's that one time to just get that one tug, that one fish, whether it's a bluegill, a little 6-inch brown trout. It's like, all right, this can be the rest of my life. Or some people are like, this stinks. I don't ever want to do this again. I feel like there's
Yeah,
no fine line.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
That's awesome. Oh, I forgot to ask you, man. Do you have a beverage that you're sipping on tonight?
Mine's boring. Mine's just a good old Diet Pepsi, so not very exciting, but
Good. That's all right. That sounds good. I love a Diet Pepsi. I decided I'd have a beer tonight, so I'm gonna crack a cold beer.
sounds good.
Cheers, man. Cheers. Awesome.
Yeah.
So Tennessee, what if you don't mind me asking, what brought you up to Minnesota?
Yeah, so ended up a pit stop in Iowa for 5 years doing grad school down there. So did have a PhD in entomology from Iowa State. So after I finished up with that, I ended up in Minnesota for work and fell in love with it. Kind of, it's home now. So
It is. Does Minnesota like at all compare to like Tennessee in any way? I mean, I feel like with the driftless, you kind of have, the rolling hills and then you have the Smoky Mountains. Do you find any resemblance there, or is it just night and day?
definitely parts of the driftless, I would say. I mean, I think there's a lot of kind of mountains I'm used to aren't quite the same mountains they have out west. So my wife always says they don't really count as mountains. A lot of our mountains in Tennessee feel pretty similar to a lot of stuff we see kind of in the driftless area too. Yeah, definitely. Some like we fish a lot in Decorah when I lived down in Iowa, and we saw a lot of similarities there. And I like going over to Wisconsin here and there too, down in Lanesboro, something like that. But yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
similarities for sure.
yeah. Decorah is beautiful, and yeah, all of the driftless is just gorgeous. So you kind of touched base right from the beginning. So what is Regal Beagle Fly Fishing? What is that all entitled?
Yeah. So Regal Beagle is my business, obviously. So mainly geared around guided fly fishing on the Mississippi River out of drift boats, so more Western style trout style fishing, but for warm water species. So we do everything on the Mississippi. Drift boats, mainly targeting smallmouth bass is the primary target, but lots of other stuff we'll talk about later. Pike, carp, buffalo, a little bit of everything that's out on the river for sure. And then the other aspect of it is the fly tying part of it. Been tying for a lot of fly shops kind of my whole career, so we did a lot of that. And that's another major focus of my business. A lot more and more in the winter time, whether it be, bulk orders for shops or a lot more custom orders for people going to destinations or pretty much kind of sold it as, anything that swims. Try to be pretty well
Mhm.
rounded in the flies I offer too.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Did fly tying kind of naturally come into your life when you started fly fishing, or was it something that kind of took time for you to want to do?
Yeah, I tied for a little bit before I even started fly fishing, actually. So I was really into
Mm.
I don't know. I thought grew up musically too, so I guess it's kind of another creative outlet for me, I guess. And got my first fly rod a few months before. It wasn't anything crazy, but I saw, hanging out, and as my grandpa tied a little bit, so I've been told. And saw some of his old stuff and thought it looked really interesting, and then started tying. It was about the same time, but yeah, it's always been right there with it. I definitely kind of fell in love with the tying aspect, maybe like 5, 6 years ago. So many more innovations kind of in the warm water side really kind of pulled me back to that as well. So yeah, I definitely always did as, pretty side by side with it. But I'd say the last, 5 or 6 years have really upped the passion on the tying side for sure.
Sure. Sure, that's awesome. Yeah, I definitely wanna I've tied a few, but it's nothing good, and I definitely wanna start to get more into that because, like you said, winter can be slow up here. There's not a whole lot to do unless, ice fishing and snowmobiling. There is a lot to do, but it's like, I would love to just sit down and have some hot chocolate and just, I don't know, tie some flies or do
Oh,
something,
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Awesome. So I do gotta ask, I love the name. Where does the name Regal Beagle come from?
Yeah. So I get that one a lot. I'll answer the truthful one first. So I have a beagle, Wrigley. She's a blue tick beagle. So she's the first time we took her in the boat, the logo, if you post it or something, has her kind of in the front of it. And that's kind of how she got in the boat the first time. And my wife said, "Oh, she looks like royalty up there." So, Regal Beagle came. That's where the name came. Fortunately, the first trade show I ever did at Great Waters, older guy came up to me and said, "You look a little young for Three's Company." And I kind of looked really confused at him. And he's like, "That's the name of the bar from Three's Company." So
Oh,
apparently the Regal Beagle was the name of the bar on Three's Company, the old sitcom, but was not aware of that.
really?
Yeah, I've managed to stay off their radar so far, I guess. So I don't think they're concerned about anything, but maybe I'll get a letter from them one day,
That's
but I don't think I'm quite on their radar. But yeah, that's the history behind the
good,
name.
yeah.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, they might be coming for you, man. You never know. They might be coming for you.
depends on how popular this podcast
That's
gets, I guess. Well, if this is gonna tip them off.
yeah, let's let's not hope, but let's
Yeah,
hope it does gain a little
yeah,
popularity, right?
sure, yeah.
That's awesome. Do you still have your dog, your beagle?
We do. Yeah, she's 7. Yep.
Oof, beautiful. I love those dogs. I think
Oh, yeah.
I want a beagle someday. They're on the top of my list. It's like labs, beagles, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I could take any dog in the world I'd be
Yeah.
happy
Oh,
with.
yeah.
I love all dogs.
Highly
That's
recommend.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what kinda pulled you into, going after, bass on the river instead of just kinda taking that traditional, trout in the driftless route? Kinda made you take that kinda decision that way?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to kinda where I grew up, was like very eastern part of Tennessee, which if you're familiar with that area at all, has some of the better trout fishing east of the Mississippi, the South Holston River, the Watauga River, both, I think, depending on the year, blue ribbon, caliber trout streams, trout rivers. They're all tailwaters there. Kind of growing up in TVA country with all the, bottom release dams creating all those trout fisheries. I had that probably 15 minutes from where I grew up, and then I had really good smallmouth fishing, maybe like 30 minutes from where my hometown. Like I said, my dad and his dad were both really big tournament bass fishermen, so I grew up doing that, kind of just conventional fishing lakes. And my dad had a friend, and when I was in middle school, my dad worked with a guy that he said kind of convinced him the lakes weren't worth it anymore, and he took him on his old John boat down our kind of local smallmouth river in Tennessee. I think the next week my dad bought a John boat, and a couple weeks after that, I was out there with him doing it and caught the first smallmouth. It was yeah, it was, something broke that day a little bit, and I still trout fish a bit in the springtime, but something about the river smallmouth really kind of pulled me in really quick, and the variety out there too was always really really important to me, I guess. And I don't know, I just enjoyed the experience a lot more, I guess, than trout fishing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I definitely get that. I feel like I've done it like twice in my entire life
Sure.
on the river on the
Yeah.
Mississippi, and like yeah, the first time I was like, A, this is very different from what I'm
Yeah.
used to. B, this is electric. Like you hook into
Oh,
one and
dude.
it's like, oh
Isn't it
wow, this
nuts?
isn't a 12-inch brown trout.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
has got some fight to it.
Yeah, man. Isn't that crazy?
It is, and, like, honestly, like, going from, fishing in the driftless to, a big river like that too, like, you feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're stepping into another planet really because
Yeah.
it's just such a different environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then casting in a boat, like, that's a whole different world too. It's
Yep.
like, "Oh, I gotta
Yeah, oh,
watch
yeah.
where things are going a little bit more here."
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Everything matters a little bit more for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your world, what makes going after smallies on the fly different from like spin gear, conventional gear?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, I'd almost say it's a more like hunting experience. I guess it's kind of the I hear people ask all the time about. I think maybe we'll cover it more later too about how some of the tactics can differ a little bit, and obviously it's not true all the time. Some of the bigger, just moving baits, but typical smallmouth fishing tends to be a lot more bottom oriented. Ned rigs or tube jigs or something like that, where you drag it along the bottom and catches a lot of fish, crazy productive. But the streamer fishing, the top water aspect of it, I mean, even some of our, bottom contact flies too. I just think gives you a lot better, you know, almost like interactions with the fish, I guess. It feels a little bit more personal, I guess, to me. About you're seeing a lot more of it. The majority of our streamers and top waters you're seeing they eat, and that's you can do that with conventional sometimes too. But I feel like it requires a lot more of the angler, I think, and requiring more of the angler just makes think that makes the reward a little bit sweeter too. At the end of it, you're moving the fly, you're not just kinda letting the current take it like you would. I think all that really factors into it, and kinda what sets it apart. Some days it's, nowhere near as effective, but can be. I think the whole experience is just a little bit more maybe all-consuming, I guess, on the fly side of things.
Yeah, yep, I would agree. I would echo that 100% from a trout stream
Sure,
aspect. Like it's just
sure.
definitely more, I don't know, intimate maybe is not the right word, but like you're
Oh,
just
yeah,
more
yeah, it is.
locked in and you're more, you're one with the river, the fish. It's like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
I have to put this fly right in front of this trout, otherwise it will not eat it. And I'm sure the same with bass. So yeah, it definitely makes you lock in
Oh, yeah.
instead of, some other traditional ways of fishing, that's for sure.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So, in your opinion, would you say bass fishing is more of an aggressive, like reaction based, or do you think it's more technical than people think?
That's a really good one. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know. I think I've heard people say, like, anything can be as technical as you wanna make it. So I think, to really get answer that question
yeah,
better, you gotta think about kinda what are you hoping to get out of it? And I tell people all the time, catching bass is easy. A lot of it, smaller ones tend to be pretty aggressive. It's pretty easy to go out and catch a pile of smaller ones. But I think if you're really going to target the bigger ones, they say, intelligence comes from age and things like that. So I mean, our average smallmouth in the river, we always say like 20 inches is, kind of the trophy point you're shooting for. That fish around us is 17 to 18 years old in most cases. So you're fishing for a fish that's, been seen a few times around the sun, kind of knows more what to look for. The aging of that fish makes it obviously pretty impressive. Um, I think you can kind of divide it into those two. If you want to focus on the reactionary side, I mean, we're fishing your bigger streamers, these bigger like peanuts, the bigger flies, things like that. You can do a lot more reaction style fishing with that, where you're up looking for, the one or two fish going down the bank that are actively hunting. And I think that's definitely super reactionary. Then you got these, smaller things. If you're gonna fish the more like bottom oriented crawdads, fish things like that, that can be a lot more technical where you're, almost Euro fishing for bass, a lot more direct contact with the fly, feeling the rocks and, feeling for the slightest takes and things like that. So I think that's one of the really appealing things
mhm,
about the bass for me. It can be as complicated as you want to make it in a way, and especially you see it guiding, you kind of see the part that trips a lot of people's triggers, and usually you get a lot of people that they want to see top water, they want to see the big streamer eats on the bank, but I'm starting to get a lot more people that want to see kind of that whole the more intricate aspect of it, and the bottom contact stuff, and reading the water, doing a lot more of the call it the more like intricate techniques, I guess. But I mean, I think, I try to, divide days into a little bit of both. Like, I want to show people the full aspect of it. And a lot of people just want to throw top water, and that's all they're interested in. That's a pretty cool day. But I think being able to kind of see that both sides of a fishery is really important. So I mean, I think it's both. So I think it's depending on
yeah,
depending on the experience you want to get out of it. I think it can really go down either way.
yeah. I think that's a great answer. I like that answer. Dude, I'm hung up on the a 20-inch smallmouth is that old, 17 to 18 years old.
Yes, I mean, they say in the kind of the northern latitudes, that's yeah, that's pretty close. I mean, I think there's been some that say, maybe the young one might be like 14, something like that. But I mean, they are growing seasons obviously super short. Yeah, I mean they're really old. I mean, same thing. I'll talk
Yeah,
about it more in some of the other species or even a crazier growth rate. But I mean, yeah, that's why Minnesota's been lucky with conservation we have with the catch and release and stuff. I mean, those fish are ancient. You could tell, like, some of the real big ones we've caught, the eyeballs are huge. They're, half their fins missing. Like, yeah, they're old fish, and especially when you get to that age, they're up there.
Dude,
I think some of,
I
especially
had no idea.
yeah, man, some of the, like, Northwoods, like, Wisconsin stuff, like the UP fish, I think some of their 20s have been, like, over 20 years old in the past. I've not heard of anything with ours being over 20, but, mid-teens is, super super reasonable. Yeah.
That is very, very
Yeah.
interesting. I would have
Yeah.
never thought that
Yeah,
in a
they're
million
old.
years. Huh,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the first
dude,
I
wow.
think the
Stories they
first
could tell. Whew.
yeah, dude, yeah, the first few years, I think, goes pretty quick. I think they get to, like, 6 inches pretty quickly, and then after that, it slows down, like, considerably, and, depending on the harshness of the winter or, low water in the summer, and there's a lot of variables that can kinda add on or subtract the year kinda on the either end of that stuff, but yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, if you see a 20, you know, I try to err on the light side, like, maybe it's 15 years, but, I mean, there's a good chance it's older than that. So, yeah, they're old fish. I mean, growing up in Tennessee, I think a 20 was, like, 8 years old. I mean, it takes double the
Hmm.
time to get there. So, I mean, it's just a factor of the growing season. I mean, obviously, yeah, they're super old fish. They're super smart fish. They're great. It's one of the other reasons I love them so much, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that changes it a little bit for me. I did not know that. That is
Yeah, man.
super
They're
cool.
old. They're old.
Like, the fact that you're chasing something that's, like, half my lifetime, like, I
Yep.
mean, I'm your age, I'm 31, like, you're
Yeah.
telling me there's fish out there, like, woo, that's crazy.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah,
It's
there
unbelievable.
there's stuff out there way older than that too.
Yeah, yeah, you get into the sturgeon and all that, like, yeah, it
Yeah.
gets to be a whole different world.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. So this is probably a question, that I should ask a lot more. So someone who, specifically 95% of the time I fish the driftless, spring fed
Yeah.
creeks, trout
Sure.
fishing.
Sure.
What would you say the biggest transition for someone who wants to try, smallmouth on the river? What would you say the best advice, biggest transition you could give someone who's looking to kind of get into that world?
Yeah, I mean, I won't overuse the, like, practice more, but I think the biggest challenge that I see with people is being able to handle, like, the change in gear. Especially, like, for my program when I'm doing the most of it centers around streamer fishing a lot early in the year and late in the year. Kinda mix in the more topwater stuff. The lightest rod I'll carry is a 7 weight. So, the majority of people that, like, coming from a trout background, that's pretty crazy heavy. I mean, I think majority of even streamer fishing in the driftless, maybe 6 weight is kind of the peak of what I hear from people. But I think, learning that, I
Yeah.
mean, casting that, especially, like, if you're gonna book a trip or something like that, I mean, it's a longer day. It's like being comfortable casting that kinda gear for, that length of time is probably the first thing I see. The other thing we see is, like, just the difference in water types and, like, how that's gonna look for, being able to read water when you're looking for bass versus trout. There's a lot of similarities too. But, being able to see, how they're gonna everything in the river rock makes such a big difference, and, it's not as sometimes it can be depth oriented, but, you're learning how to read different current flows around rocks, and, it's not always about just drifting the riffle perfect, and it's finding those, small parts within the big, it just when you look at a riffle on a driftless stream versus a riffle that's 3/4 a mile across on the Mississippi, it's you're looking for the same features, but, yeah, it just kinda everything's a little bit sized up, and when there's a lot more options about, there's 10 rocks in the same riffle that look good. How do you pick the
Exactly.
best out of those 10 that's going to be holding the majority of those fish? And a lot of that just comes down to being able to read currents and things like that. So I think there's a lot of skill sets from trout that really do carry over, pretty well. I mean, it's a lot of the same, like, stripping techniques when you're streamer fishing. There's not a whole lot of difference there, honestly, but it's just getting more comfortable with that sized up gear. We do a lot more intermediate line fishing, which, some people may do for trout, but that
Yeah.
tends to maybe be more warm water focused, at least, from my experience working with new people. But yeah, I think it's usually the biggest adjustments, just the gear. Your strip setting, obviously different, but, if you're from trout streamer fishing, it's not as big, but, I get a lot of people that have never really needed to strip set things before, and, learning how to, feed a fish a little bit differently, and, fighting them differently too. It's there's a lot of things that carry over, but there's a lot of things that, people can come in and have worked on too to kind of ease the learning curve quite a bit, but Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I can definitely, echo that. Like, yeah, coming into it when I did it my first couple times, like, yeah, I had an 8 weight, so that's just like, okay, this is a
Yep.
lot different from my 3
Yeah.
weight or my 5 weight. So
Yep.
that was
Yeah.
something to get used to. And like you said too, like at the end of the day, like my arms and shoulders, they were sore. Like, and
Yeah.
you're constantly,
Yeah.
constantly casting, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm sore.
That's what I tell people all the time, like, people especially people that come from the trout world. I mean, I don't wanna say trout's predictable because 'cause I've had plenty of days of trout fishing, kick my butt pretty well too, but I feel like smallmouth, you're covering a lot more water, like, pretty consistently. I mean, when you're trout fishing, you're targeting the pool or you're targeting the riffle or the tail out or something
Ex
like that, and, a lot of times, especially if you're streamer fish or topwater, you're covering a lot more ground. It's a lot more, like, constant. I tell people, like, the more casting you make, the better your chances. Don't feel like that's as applicable to trout because you tend to have a pretty dialed in area you're focusing on, or your casting is more we're gonna
exactly.
hit this one target, and especially on the river when you're moving so fast and we're covering 12 miles a day. There's obviously areas that we're not going to fish because they're not going to be productive, but with that many fish in the area and that much water to cover, you gotta be ready for that kind of action. I think. Yeah, I think it's that's probably the biggest thing, just adjusting, like, the type of fishing differences, I think is a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that you bring up, like, too, like, in a driftless stream, you come up on a run and it's like, "Okay, this is my chance to
Sure.
catch a fish. If there's a trout here, it's going to be here." Where you on the Mississippi River, I'm sure the options are just like, you look at the river, fish could be here, fish could be here, fish could be here. So I'm sure that just kinda can get overwhelming for someone who's, like, never seen, big
Yeah.
water like that. So that's a good
That
call out, yeah.
yeah, too. I mean, you get people on the boat, and it's my favorite thing to hear, but it's always, "Oh, this looks like such good water." You're saying that for, like, 12 straight miles. So, like, how do you figure out which of the really good water is actually where the fish are at? That takes a lot of time to really dial in, kinda where those patterns are gonna play out at, but, yeah, it's just I mean, and we're focusing pretty heavy on the big river too. Smaller stream bass fishing too can be a lot closer to trout fishing, but when you're looking at the big rivers and things like
Mhm.
that, it's just learning how to spend your time more efficiently, I think is, you know, a really big part of it. And eliminating the water that, might be marginal or might not hold the fish you're looking for, I think is really important too when you're covering such a big span every day.
Sure, sure. No, that's awesome. That's great insight. That's really cool. I honestly like I'll take that advice because for someone who's looking to get more into it, it's good to just hear what different, what you can do better, and just like you said, the gear I think is one of the biggest things to get used to. It's like, okay, our gear is gonna be a lot different here. We're not using 6X tippet. We're not,
Yeah, yeah.
doing this anymore. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, that's always the first
I
question
was
I get. I get that question a lot from people, but, "Well, I'm gonna break him off if I set the hook too hard," and I usually when I do that, I have one of those, like, tippet stack, where they're all in a row, and I'll kinda hand them to people and be like, "What's the smallest number you see there?" It's, 12 pounds, usually the lightest I carry, and I was like, "That's probably heavier than your heaviest." It's always kind of a shock to people to see, majority of time, if you're streamer fishing, our fly is the 16-pound fluoro. It's not as easy to break that as you think. So, getting people to feel comfortable with that's a really big, especially like you said, if you're used to 6X and, dry flies or midges or something like that. You know, you're, you've got to break a lot of habits there to get someone to, trust the gear at that point.
yeah.
I've done the thing before when you'll start out and I'll hook a fly on a rock or something, tell people to practice strip set, and you'll get the first little, like, you'll get the little, like, baby strip sets, and it's like, you're not gonna pop it, and, being able to show people they can trust it's, that's a pretty big deal sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's funny. Yeah, yeah, when I showed up last year and Mitch, Mitch,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
was like, "All right, Mitch, I got my 8 weight, I got some 1X tippet on here, like, I should be ready to rock," and he's like,
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, like, sure, but, like, yeah, you guys, like, build out your leaders and stuff, and I'm just like,
oh,
I
yeah,
don't really know
yeah,
anything about that."
yeah. That
But, yeah,
stretch
it's
that
very
stretch
cool,
that
yeah,
stretch y'all fish has got some big uns too. Yeah, that was a good stretch for you to
yeah,
see.
that was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about it probably every other day, I'm just like, "Dang, that
Yeah,
was so much fun."
yeah, yeah,
It's good times. Awesome.
yeah.
So I'm gonna switch it up a little bit on you. I know you like to, look into other species too. So what brought you into targeting carp on the fly rod?
So, carp for me started on, my I call him my papa. It's a southern name for your grandfather. Was a big like
Mhm.
catfish and carp fisherman. We had a local lake by us called Steels Creek Park. My papa was a really big into the like dough ball fishing. He loved to catch the catfish and stuff. And one day I got to see like a bunch of kids out like throwing bread, feeding the ducks and stuff like that. And the carp would follow the ducks around and kind of steal the bread off the backs of the ducks and stuff. And that was like I tell people that was the first fly I ever came up with was I thought I was really cool. We called it the Corona's crust, and I would take like two pieces of white foam and glue it together, and then take a lighter and singe the end so it would look like a crust on it. And yeah, went out there and was catching the carp
Really?
on bread. Yeah, was out catching the carp on bread flies. So then I thought that was really cool. And then I figured out, hey, there's actually carp that eat real food too. Got more into like the bonefishy redfish aspect of carp fishing too, with like the tailing fish and stuff like that. But yeah, it
Mhm.
started throwing bread flies at carp that were eating off of ducks. So it's not as it's not as such a beautiful story as probably some people's intro to a fish, but yeah, it was mine. So yeah, that's where it all started. Yeah,
Dude, that's
now I've gotten into the other aspects of it pretty heavy now too.
that's a phenomenal story. I think that's a
Yes.
great way to get into
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Just piqued your interest and
Oh
you
yeah.
used what you were seeing and literally
Yeah.
made it work for yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's about as cool as it gets. That's unreal. I've never targeted trout, or sorry, carp on the fly rod, and I feel like definitely, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's not very popular, but I feel like it could be kinda getting popular. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. A little bit of background to it. I worked at when I was in college in Tennessee. I worked at a fly shop that was kind of in our town that we went to school in. And at that point, so that would have been like 2012, something like that. That was the time when like Orvis and all the companies were like producing carp lines. That was about the time when like the Drake was carp articles were on the cover. I feel like that was kind of the peak of it. Like in my career, I mean, you look it back at Dave Whitlock wrote books about it in the 70s and 80s, talking about doing it. But I feel like from at least my life so far, that seemed like it was kind of the peak of it. I mean, we were selling fly lines that were specifically made for carp, and there was carp patterns for the first time that were like commercially available. So I mean, I remember that kind of peaked of it, and it seemed like I've heard so many people, talk about like people that were guiding for about it was. It felt like it was hard for people to get many like repeat interest in it. Like people either it felt like to me it was people wanting to like check the box. Some people did it once and that was all they needed to do. But then it seems like, people say it all the time. It's almost like the culty thing of fly fishing to me a little bit right now, but the people that love it, man, they really, really love it. And there's another, group of people that do it once, say they caught their carp and then they can move on with it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be cool to see it come back around. I think it's, it's odd that like, you hear the like, the epicenter of that is like, the big carp tournaments. Like the Denver South Platte River has the big one every year out there, and that seems to be, we have a really big one here in Minneapolis that Evan does with, carp aside. Like that's a pretty big deal, almost a national level. Now we get people up here all the time to fish it. So I feel like the community we have here does a really big, big devotion towards carp, and those people doing it all around here. So I guess I see it a lot in our community, but I guess, across the board, I feel like it's not as popular as maybe it used to be 10 years or so ago. I'm sure the next person will tell you I'm completely wrong, but just from what I see, I mean, I remember I used to get a lot more questions about it than I do now. So I mean, for that's just my
Okay.
personal experience with it. And I think too, it depends on kind of the area you are. Here in Minnesota, we have a lot of great things that the DNR does, but I think it's kind of tough for us to get. I've had so many carp ponds in Minneapolis area that it was really good for carp, and you go back one day and they've got rote and owned out of there. So I mean, I feel like it's easier to find. When I was in grad school in Iowa, we were down there. It was incredible carp fishing. We did that like 4 or 5 times a week because they were everywhere. And it was, Iowa's a heck of a place to fish that no one ever thinks about. But we had some of the best carp fishing I've ever seen down there. So I mean, I think it seems to be pretty like regional based. I didn't see much of it growing up in the South that much. Midwest seems to have kind of their pockets of it, and I've not had the experience doing it out west, but if you follow any of the cart media, we had the Iowa Fly Show last weekend. Jeff Courier was there talking about
Yeah.
how great the carp fishing is, Idaho and the western states. And for my take, it seems like that area kind of dominates kind of the prevalence for it. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's a really good question. I'd love to see it get really popular again. But I feel like I
Yeah.
feel like I've seen the peak of it and kind of watched it fall off a bit. But yeah, I think it'd be great if it got
Mhm.
more popular. I think a lot more people should do it. But I don't know. There's so many other great stuff in the Midwest here. It's kind of hard to feel like it doesn't have the draw to people's attention up here that maybe it did in areas that don't have, you know, every other warm water species and trophy versions of it everywhere else. I mean, I think carp kind of get the victim of circumstance a little bit of getting pushed down the list of what people care about when you got so much else around.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that's a big thing in Minnesota, like you said. I mean, we have an endless amount of variety to choose. When you were talking about the fly line for carp, is there a specific, like, fly line that you use for carp? What's that look like?
So I do a lot of it with like kind of saltwater oriented lines. I mean, for the majority of stuff we do, we're only doing it when it's warmer outside. It's like the difference in cores doesn't seem to mess with it. I always hear the thing talked about all the time about like carp are so much like bonefish, and I don't know that that's quite true in my experience. I always say they compare really well to redfish for me. Um, feeding activities pretty similar. I think redfish are a lot easier if you put a fly in front of them. You don't seem to get as many spooks out of redfish as you do carp. But it's like the lines I use like the scientific angler, like redfish tapered lines. They tend to have a lot more like neutral colors, kind of closer to the head of the line. I think that can make a pretty big difference. And it's, it's a little bit aggressive. I think usually they're like a half a line size heavy in the head. Not the same, not the same density as some of our bigger bass lines can be, but little something. I mean, the majority of our shots to carp are 10 feet or less. So you're not really need to making a super long cast for it. You just kind of need that head to flip it over and present something pretty short, in most cases. So I really like the redfish lines. Yeah. And some of the bass lines can do pretty well too, but any kind of warm water focus line, I think can be pretty good.
Interesting. When a carp decides to eat a fly, is it a smack? Is it like a little sip? Like, what does that look like for a carp? I just envision them like slowly like sucking in a streamer or something. Like, is that accurate or no?
Uh, I don't want to give you the "it depends" answer, but I think the majority of times, like whenever we do it, if we're targeting 'em, you're fishing for a fish that's like actively feeding for the most part. And you hear people like say it in three different groups. You got the feeders, the cruisers, and the ones that don't care.
Mhm.
So a lot of the fish that I tell people if you really want to get good at it, you're gonna spend a lot of time casting the fish that we're never gonna eat when you start out. So yeah, I think the big thing is kind of identifying the actual, call them happy fish. So the ones that are, down in the mud with their heads in the mud or the tail sticking up out of the water and they're throwing silt all over the place. Like that's the happy fish. That's the one that's going to eat. So that's usually what I tell people if you're getting into it, you can go out and see, I get the whole thing all the time. There's a million carp in my lake, but they just kind of swim around all day. And usually the ones you're throwing at that
Yeah.
are just kind of sitting there, aren't really actively feeding. Yeah, I mean, for most of the eats, I mean, it's for especially for the fly rod game. I mean, it's not impossible to blind cast one, but it's pretty dang tough to blind cast one. I mean, this when you see them eating on the bottom and you actually see your fly like go in the mouth, the in and out they can do when they suck it in and spit it out is so quick. If you don't see it, you'll never know. It's so quick when they're
Really?
feeding. Oh yeah, man, it's really fast, and they can suck it in and spit it out before you'd even feel it if you don't see it. So the visual aspect of it, I think, is probably one of the most appealing aspects of it too. You're throwing to a fish, in our water is probably one of the biggest things you're going to see that day. I mean, the majority of the hits are, I tell people like watch the body language of the fish when you're doing it. You kind of see the rhythm of the tail doing this, and you'll throw your fly in front of it, and it'll stop or it'll kick real hard one direction, and that change in body language is usually to eat. So if you don't actually see it go in the mouth, if you can figure out something you can see really well, whether it's the mud plume kind of spits out quicker or the tail changes directions. There's a guy out west that kind of, when I was really getting into it was kind of the head of carp fishing, if you will. He always said carp's the most like spiritual fish you can fish for because you never really know if it ate it. It's a lot of luck. It's a lot of hoping for the best when you set the hook about you don't actually see the fly go in its mouth. It's you can take a good guess, but you never really quite know until the rod bends or not. So yeah. But yeah, you don't really get that. There's definitely instances like when the big cicada emergences happen every year, wherever they're gonna be at that year. That's crazy. I've been lucky enough to do that 4 or 5 times over the years, and that I tell people everything that I just said about carp, ignore everything, because 'cause they're the dumbest fish in the world when that's happening. So, they'll eat everything, and that's when you see the
Really?
big oh, yeah, man, that's when you see the big, the fish jumping over top of one another at the top to eat the fly, and, like, all of that caution just goes straight to the wind when the cicadas are out. You ask about, like, streamer fishing. We see it sometimes on the river, very rarely, and it's never really, like, minnow patterns for me at least, but I fish a lot of those, like, peanut style flies or, like, some of my crawdad patterns down near the bottom, and we get quite a few
Mm,
bycatch doing that, and that's usually you're in pretty constant contact with the fly, so you're feeling that kinda pick up, and you can set the hook pretty hard. But we I've never really got them to, like, eat, legit streamers on the river, like strangers or anything like that, but we get a lot of them on, those crawdad-oriented flies for sure in the river. That happens a lot, but those you'll feel a little bit more, but, you know, 99% of the time you're watching the fish eat it. It's cool.
dang, dude,
If you
that
haven't tried it,
sounds
if you haven't tried it, you need to come over and do
absolutely
it. Yeah,
yeah, dude, that's like you said, the visual aspect, that has to be
yeah.
just so much fun watching that all
Yeah, it's also really it's really cool here because that'll happen in a couple weeks here. They're usually the first fish that gets active once, ice goes out. So there's instances here where, like, you'll have ice on one side of the pond, and you'll have actively feeding carp in the open water on the other end, so that's usually one of the first things to kick here for us, so that's the
sure.
done a little bit of scouting for them, and we've caught a few on the river here lately, but yeah, they're such a cool
Mhm.
fish. I
Yeah,
I think everyone needs to do it. You learn so much from them.
yeah. That's awesome, that's awesome. I definitely
Yeah,
am gonna try that out. I
yeah.
just and I would assume they have a pretty good fight to them, so that's
Yeah, yeah,
always a bonus.
yeah, you got a real good chance of seeing your backing every time, especially if you get one over, 10 pounds or so.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Oof.
majority of times you'll see your
Okay,
backing.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, a little one, maybe not, but if you get one 8, 10 pounds, usually. Yeah,
Holy
yeah,
cow. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
You sold me, man, you sold me.
yeah, yeah,
I've never gotten into my backing in the drift so
yeah.
I'll tell you that right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty rare there, I would say.
Dude, that is very cool. What would you say, like, is the biggest mistake people, like, make when they're, targeting carp with a fly rod? Is there, like, some common mistakes you see right off the bat?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the biggest one is I don't know if you wanna get into, like, flies or anything yet, but I feel like people spend a ton of time on, like, making sure the fly is correct, and people,
Mhm.
kinda come into it with the trout mentality of, we gotta like, the match the hatch thing for carp is, I hear people that's probably the number one question I get about, you know, what fly is the best? And, the answer someone told me when I was first getting into it is, yeah, the one at 8. So that tends to be my
Yeah,
answer when I tell people that. I mean, I think the biggest, the first issue you see is, like, people get so hung up on the fly, and I try to talk someone through, like, what's happening. You've got a fish that already has pretty poor vision with its head stuck in the mud with mud all around its face. It's not really seeing too much of anything. So I mean, the biggest thing really comes down to presentation, and I try to break people down with the flies, but it's not really a match the hatch. It's more of a what fly can you get down quick enough while not spooking him at the same time. Super spooky fish. Like if your line lands too close, if your fly plops, they're gone. So I mean the approach and, like, the presentation is definitely the two biggest takeaways. If you've read anything about it, if you've had other guests that talk about it, the drag and drop component of it is really, the most popular pattern to do it when you're casting past the fish and you're kind of pulling the fly across the top of the water and just kind of dropping it right on his nose. So I mean, it's usually, I try to tell people you got about a dinner plate size area you got to drop the fly into. If it's any more than that, they won't see it. There's so much movement and stuff going on, their lateral lines not probably in tune as much with a little bug sliding in front of them. So, I mean, they've almost gotta think
interesting.
it just popped across them. You gotta make it look like they dug it out of the bottom and they're gonna grab it. So, I mean, learning how to
Huh,
present to them properly, that's the biggest thing, and if you're lucky enough, like, great friend and guides in Wisconsin for 'em, they just like the mulberries stuff, that's a whole 'nother, carp carp dream situation that I've not been lucky enough to do, but if you're in an area with a lot of mulberries, the carp really love eating them off the trees, and that can be almost like a dry fly, presentation for carp fishing that happens every year if you're in one of those areas, so, yeah, it's just learning how to present to them, I think, is the biggest deal, and not hitting them too close, but not hitting them too far. It's the it's kind of like the Goldilocks of fishing to me a little bit about you got to get it just right. But that's definitely the biggest issue. Either people know that they got to be close and they're too close, or people are a little bit too afraid and they'll put it too far away.
Dang, that is very cool. I didn't know their vision was that bad. That's just they've always just
Yeah,
kinda had bad vision.
yeah. And in the flies, I tell people like you want to be a lot more like weight focused than really anything else. Just tie something buggy. A lot of people use woolly buggers with great success. You
Yeah,
want something
yeah.
I'll keep holding this one up, but you want something with like the hook point up. This is a good carp play too, but you want the hook point up so it can crawl along the bottom with them and doesn't get hung up as easy. That's a big part of it. And I'll tell people like once you find a fly you like, if it's a bugger, if it's you know, a little worm pattern, whatever it is. Tie the same fly, but tie it in different weights. We use a lot of like B chain eyes for carp flies. Just give it enough weight to flip the hook over, but not enough weight to really like plop the water too high. A lot of stuff we fish for are river fish where they're in heavier current. So, I fish a lot of little crawdad flies in the river form or like damsel flies. So you want to have different weights to same pattern, but maybe an extra small B chain and then have some with a medium and then maybe have a couple with a larger one if you need to get it down in current quicker. So I think the weighting of the fly is a lot more important than the actual like what you're trying to mimic with the fly, especially for carp fishing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think people that get into fly fishing can get really caught up on like matching the hatch in general. And like, don't get me wrong, yes, it is important for
Oh,
trout, but
yeah.
like at the end of the day, too, like it's just presentation and putting the right fly in front of the fish. And like, yeah, like when I first started, I would get so overwhelmed. Like, okay, what am I gonna put out there today? Like,
Yeah.
it's May. It must be May flies. I mean to do strictly May flies. Like,
Yeah.
you can get so wrapped up in, like, trying to figure that stuff out, and, like,
Yeah.
yes, very important, but at the end of the day, like, get out there, get on whatever nymph you want to put on and start fishing
Sure.
and see what happens, and,
Yeah.
yeah, I think people can get very, very caught up in that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
certainly did.
Yeah, oh, me too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's fun, like, you do eventually and, like, get to learn everything as you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
I'm someone who's, studied that, like, it is a
Yeah.
blast to understand the hatches and figure out when they're happening and what they mean, like, it's probably, like, my 2nd favorite part about fly fishing is just, like, understanding the bugs, it's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely blast. Awesome, so, one more carp question for you, what
Yeah.
is a big myth in the carp fishing world that you would like to put an end to?
I think the biggest one I've ran into is you have to kill every one of them you catch. I think maybe that's a uniquely Midwestern problem, but with the more
Yeah.
invasive carp species that have kind of made their way further north over the years, so many times in Minnesota, and like
Mhm.
now with the new regulations, hopefully that gets a little bit better. But you know, you don't have to kill every single one of them you catch. A lot of people that bow fish for them, like I'm all for it, if as long as you're like using it properly. But the people that are fishing for them, and I think it's just, like, people not having the knowledge base, and, like, that's fine, but I think it's more just, like, trying to educate people that if you catch a common carp, you don't have to kill it. You can put it back, the genie's not going back in the bottle on those. So just killing for the sake of killing seems to be a lot more prevalent in carp fishing for some reason that I see, and same way with a lot of the other natives here, like the bowfin, buffalo, and things like that. I think, that applies to those fish too for me, but just I wish kinda you could snap your fingers and everyone would just kinda know the difference in what you've caught and, using the resources wisely, I guess, and I feel like I see that in carp, and I've had so many people tell me like, "Oh, you have to kill those here," and I think that's probably the one myth I'd like to get rid of is that you don't have to kill every common carp you catch, and that, if you
Yeah,
want to and you
agreed.
eat it, I hear a lot of people that do eat them, and I think they're supposed to be pretty good, but
Yeah,
I never
smoke
really
them.
got
Yep.
yeah, I never really got the concept of, you have to kill everything, so yeah, I wish I could snap my fingers and make that go away.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, killing to just to kill is never a
Yeah.
good thing. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, at least get something out of it, and yeah,
Yep.
dude, I hear a lot of people smoke
Yeah.
carp, and they
Yeah.
say it's actually really good. I mean, it's just white fish at the end of the day, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I feel like you could give it a try, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome, awesome, cool. So, couple wrap up questions for you. Is it hard for you to like balance guiding your personal life, fly tying? Like, where do you figure all that time out?
Yeah, that's a fun question. I think this is the first year I've read into it more than anything about. So this is my third full year of guiding here in Minnesota. I did in Tennessee a little bit too, but this is my third year of it this year, and like seeing the, it's all good problems to have, but like trying to figure out how many trips you want to do a year and budget that. I think the time's a lot easier to come by in the winter time for me, especially like the tying is kind of just like a nightly activity for me. Like I try to tie a few flies every night, and that usually allows me to get all the orders and things
Mhm.
done like that. And I have a really supportive wife. My wife Emily really supports everything we do, and I think that's probably the most important thing you can have is like the support system around you that helps out. Like she'll work the show booths with me and kind of supports the dream in that way. So that's a really big part of it. And having her is a huge aspect of everything we do. But just figuring out the, yeah, I don't really have a great answer. I'm still working on still working on how to balance it all, especially with another full-time job as well, and do guiding 2 or 3 nights a
Yeah,
week usually, and then maybe like one of the weekend days too. So it's a lot of long days in the summer, but I've kind of always took the approach about the winter times when I can kind of slow down a bit. So yeah, I think it's something I'm learning how to do a little bit better maybe this year with it's the busiest show season we've had. Trying to get to all the expos and trying to figure out kind of where you want to be in terms of how many trips you want to do and how many fly orders you want to take. And probably not the best at it yet, but hopefully I'm getting a little bit better.
yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, of course, it's all a journey. Yeah, I echo that. Having a support system is huge when you're chasing a passion and you're trying to make something out of something you love. Like if you don't have that support, it's very, very hard. And yeah, without that, it's like I don't see how people ever do anything like that. And yeah, it's huge. And like you said too, like the networking aspect is so important.
Oh
Like
yeah,
going to
man.
these expos, talking to people, just getting your name out there and just making friendships, like, that's half of it right there, and that's
Oh yeah.
A, super fun, but B, very time consuming too.
Oh yeah. 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 Definitely. Those awards are not the fly shows we do. I I've had to kind of train the social battery a little bit to make it through 3 days of that. Usually by the end of that, I'm ready to not talk to anyone for a couple of days. But yeah, it's been really fun to kind of to build it up from the ground. It's been a lot of fun seeing how far we've come in 3 years already. So yeah, it's been great.
That is awesome, that is 3 years is when you started in the company, huh? That it's been going for 3 years?
Yeah, I started in 2023, and that year I was just mainly just fishing with new people, try to get my name out there, and then kind of 2024 was the first full year of like advertised and getting people to book and things like that. So this will be my going into my third full guide season, fourth like if you want to count when the business was like technically like made 2023, but this will be my third full season actually guiding here.
Awesome, man, good for you, that's awesome, yeah. But yeah, year 3, it's only gonna get better.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So, a couple more questions for you. I do see that you like to enjoy doing a little writing on the side. Do you tend to write about the outdoors, fishing, or is that just a whole other aspect of your life?
Say a little bit of both. So, I mean, my career, I do a lot more like scientific writing about kind of public health
Yeah.
entomology, and I work mainly with mosquitoes, black flies, ticks, kind of all this stuff that can give you some kind of disease or nuisance biting. And I've written a lot of more like scientifically focused articles. I did a book on designing new repellents and insecticides for mosquito control a few years back. So that's one aspect of it, and then I definitely have
Really?
and I definitely have the kind of the more fishing related side. Did an article with like Fulling Mill, trying to more prioritize that in the future. Honestly, I've been had some great talks at the Iowa show with some people trying to get some more connections into the writing side. So that's definitely the part I want to continue to work on quite a bit more. But yeah, and I've done a lot more like the scientific writing in terms of research publications and things like that for the entomology career, and then I'm kind of getting more into the fishing side of things. I do a monthly newsletter that I send out to everyone, so that's a little
Mhm.
bit more like fun writing. So like I do that once a month, and then now trying to work more on some goal would be to get some like magazine pieces eventually. I think that would be really cool to if I could get to that point with the writing side of things. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's definitely the growing part of what I'm trying to do now is get more involved on the writing side. But yeah,
Dude, good for you. That's really cool. Just to yeah,
thank you.
have that creative
Yeah,
output and just like being able to share your stories and
yeah,
especially stuff that's useful. I mean, like, I mean, at the end of the day, in our area, mosquitoes and ticks are extremely dangerous and they
oh
cause a
yeah,
lot of problems in the springtime.
yeah, for
I'm
sure.
like,
Yeah,
ooh, I'm not looking forward to tick season, man. I'm not.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's gonna be like I feel like it's gonna hit hard. I don't know how it goes, but I feel like every year it just gets worse with the wood ticks, and it's like, oh gosh, here we go.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome, cool. So one fun question for you. I ask everyone this just because we're all anglers and we all are spending long days on the water. What is your go-to snack when you are out on the water?
So the go-to for me is the oatmeal cream pie, old school. That was my, like, papa's favorite little treat, so every time we would go carp fishing or catfishing, he would bring me one. So that's just kinda the tradition. He was a big influence of mine too, and that was his thing, so even when I started guiding, I always bring one for everyone. Usually people are like, "Ah, you're gonna eat that?" I said, "Yeah, dude, they're great." I don't I don't know how many people support this choice of mine, but most people do, but yeah, that's it for sure. This the single, not the double
Yeah.
decker one. That's a little bit too much, but yeah,
Yeah.
even better if you put it in the cooler, keep it a little cool. Yeah, that hits the spot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I'm
yeah,
gonna try
yeah.
that out. I love little cream pies,
Oh
man.
yeah, dude, the
Those are
best.
phenomenal.
That's it.
Dude, that's my dad's, like, go-to fishing snack is the little Swiss cake things, the
Yeah,
little I don't
yeah,
even I think that's what they're called, Swiss cakes. He
something like that.
always has those on the boat, and they're just so tasty, and, yeah, those get a little frozen, a little cold, you just
Yep,
pull them out, and they're just
yeah,
perfect.
yeah. That's it. That's
That's too funny. Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, cool. Those are all the questions I had for you. Do you have any, closing thoughts, any shout outs you'd like to make?
All right, I think I'm good. Thank you for having me again. Yeah, if anyone wants to get on the river this year, just look it up. It's Regal Beagle Fly Fishing on all the different social media, Instagram, Facebook. It's all there. So yeah, love to. If anyone's interested in the river, love to get you out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on, Caleb. I know this time of the year is starting to ramp up for everyone in our world, so I appreciate you taking the time to come chit chat with me.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. It was a blast.